Welcome to another episode of the Choose Strong podcast. I'm just going to dive right in because I know that today's episode is going to be so much fun. It's probably going to go longer than we had planned, but I am so excited about today's guest because not only is he one of my dearest friends and very well known in the ultra outdoor endurance community, but in my opinion is also one of the greatest endurance world filmmakers, storytellers around. And I just have so much admiration for my good friend. Everyone, welcome Billy Yang to the podcast. Hello, Billy. How are you?
Wow. Those were a lot of adjectives you threw at me, Sally.
It was.
I think maybe half of them undeserving, but thank you just the same. How are you, Sally?
I'm good. Okay, this is like long overdue, but also we were supposed to do this in person, and I that was what I originally requested. Hey, let's do this in person. But I think after Moab, we will do that because it has been, and for you and I both have been traveling so much in the past couple months, and so being at home has been a luxury.
Careful what you promise people, by the way. After this podcast, you may not want to sit down and record with me again.
No, this has been, gosh, I really want to start like in 10 different spots because one, for those of you that are listening, and I have to actually say this first, Billy, our show is not just for runners. Like we have a huge community of people that, they don't run ultras, they like to be active, but we really try to target just every walk of life with our show. So our tagline is strong mind, strong body, strong love. And so we use running and endurance as more of the parallel to life, just a fun way to tell stories and then relate them back to life, which is another reason why I'm so excited to have you on today. But I think I just want to first start in and introduce everyone to you and who you are and just how we became friends. And then we can kind of move into the topic that I have planned today, which is just basically how to be a rock star pacer and crew chief. And both of those things, being a pacer and crew chief, they really relate to life too, because it's like how to be a good friend, how to support others around you, some really good parallels. But like I said, not everyone here is totally into ultras and endurance running, but we do have a lot of people who love to crew and love to pace and like they're happy with that. So I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today will really intertwine well. Before I continue, I thought we could just like say how we met and how we became friends so long ago, almost 15 years ago. And then
you'll bring in somebody who's actually qualified to speak on the crew and pacer part, right? Because I don't know what I'm doing here for that. Okay, but for the first part, we can at least go through the first half and then see where it goes from there. Sally McRae and I met back in, I want to say it was 2010 or 11. Can you correct me on which?
Yeah, it's 10.
It's 10. Okay, 2010, 50-mile race at the PCT 50. It was my first 50-miler. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was also yours as well, right?
Second. My second. I had just done one like,
you did,
I think a few weeks before American River 50.
Yes, American River 50, where the amazing photos of your kids screaming, Isaiah screaming for you as you were leaving one of the aid stations.
Yeah.
And what else do I remember about that famous photo? It's you dressed in like bright pink and yellow, of course.
I was wearing cutoff socks for arm sleeves.
Yeah. Well, and that dovetails into this story because what I remember about you is that you were both super bright in appearance in the attire that you were wearing, but also in your personality, as you are wont to do. You were extremely joyful. You were extremely positive. And I was anything but when you came up on me. Somewhere early in the race. I think we were probably about like somewhere 10. Between mile 5 and 10.
Yeah, and you're right.
I hear this really bubbly, effervescent voice running behind me. We were running on a single track, and I was having none of it. I was not in a good headspace. I was thinking it was super hard early on, and maybe I was not quite prepared. I had all these doubts in my head. And then I hear Sally's voice, and Sally's engaging me in conversation, which I was, if I remember correctly, reluctantly obliging you in maybe very terse answers. And I think after about, I don't know, somewhere between 10
We never
minutes.
even looked at each other.
We never looked at each other. You were sitting in the back of my head. I had no idea.
Behind you.
Yeah, I had no idea what you looked like, but you were clearly having a better day than me. I think that much we were able to establish. So I at some point I was like, this is ridiculous. I stepped aside on the trail, let you continue on. And then somewhere in like miles 20 or no, it was okay. So it would be an out and back. So somewhere like between 15 and 20, I met my friends and now our mutual friends, Josh Spector and Colin Cooley. They were out there supporting me. God bless those guys. And I remember saying to them, hey, I met this girl, Sally. I think she's doing the Bishop High Sierra 50 miler or 100K the following weekend because you're just that much of an animal. Yeah, I'm going to do my second 50-mile race and I'm going to do my first 100K the following weekend because this is what we do in the sport. And because Josh was also going to be running his first 50-miler at the Bishop High Sierra 50-miler the following weekend. So I wanted to be sure to connect you guys when we eventually saw you at the turnaround. And we had no idea what you looked like. And then there you were in your bright fluorescent colors. Same thing. Personality-wise, super bubbly and super loud. And I was like, oh, okay, there's that girl. I remember that voice and I remember that laugh, certainly. So quick intro. We pass each other, and then I do believe, back. Yeah, but then you really connected with Josh the following weekend, and then I also remember you guys doing. You guys did a long run at the Bulldog. Malibu
because I was doing the Bulldog too.
Yeah. And then eventually, eventually, a few months down the line, I agreed to pace you at your first 100-mile race at the Angeles Crest 100. And I think I was like, Sally, we had kept in touch
over social media,
Twitter.
Yeah, but Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, and then I was like, this is before I pace you at your first 100-mile race. Maybe it's a good idea to hang out again because we're still technically strangers. So I do believe a couple days before Angeles Crest, you were gracious enough to drive down and run in the Santa Monica Mountains, where we decided to do a night run.
Yeah, Los
Leones. Together. Yeah, and then of course small talk immediately out the window. We had the big talk right away as we were running with headlamps, doing the 7-mile out and back, and then became thick as thieves, really good friends from that point on.
Yeah, very good friends. I think that was what has always been at the root of our friendship, which I'm really excited about this conversation anyway, is and probably why we've been friends for so long, why you've always been such a valuable friend to me is because we are really good at being very honest with each other. We don't do the small talk for too long.
Nope.
You're okay with calling me out on the carpet, with challenging me, with speaking truth to me. And I think those are all traits of a real true friend. And we just loved a lot of the same things. So I think that you and I both kind of have a very strong creative side to us. We're big dreamers. We're storytellers. We love adventure and we love to eat a lot of food. And so over the years, all those things just went hand in hand. And I know over the years and even now that you're always someone that I can kind of bounce things off of, whether it's an idea, or maybe a hard spot that I'm in. And I've always appreciated that about you. So I think that that's also why I wanted to bring up the pacer and crew, because you were my first pacer I've ever had. And the stories that we have, it still is one of my favorite experiences ever. Okay. And it's something you and I can laugh at.
Can we title this episode "What Not to Do When You Pace and Crew" and then just extrapolate all my stories?
Well, here's the thing, Billy. I think you and I have been in the sport for so long. So people, when they approach us or they communicate with us, that's the other thing too. Billy and I we've traveled to a lot of races. We've done a lot of the same events. We've stood on the stage together many times. We've done a lot of podcasts and interviews together. I think we've just always kind of meshed well. So people are like, oh, they're pros, they're experienced. They've been in this for a long time. But sharing where we started is hilarious. And I think it's really comforting for people that are brand new to the sport or don't know much about the sport, that they understand that we all have a starting point and we were all rookies at one point. And
always learning, always learning, forever learning. A student.
Forever a student. You are so right. But Billy, why don't you at least first explain the Angeles Crest 100 about that race, because it is one of the toughest hundreds in the United States. It's not well marketed. It's been around forever, which is going to make you pacing me and what you did all the more hilarious.
Well, so Sally and I, we do have that in common as well. While PCT wasn't our first 50, it was our second 50. We do have our first 100, although it didn't take place at the same time. Angeles Crest 100 was both of our first 100-mile race in the high atop the San Gabes. Starts in Wrightwood, climbs up. I would say there's like different ecosystems. I kind of think about it in thirds. Like the first third of the race is this high country, right? So you're running somewhere between 6,000, 9,000 feet to the top of Mount Baden-Powell. And then you're on this beautiful, just like beautiful PCT section of the race, very mountainous. And then you kind of drop into like the second third, which is more, you're at the apex of the day, the sun, the heat. The previous iteration, you're dropping into canyons where it gets really hot. And then the last third, which is still super mountainous, but like it's relentless. It keeps kicking your butt. And in particular, I'm thinking about the iteration that you and I ran from Chantry on, and you're just like in really technical footing. You're still climbing up a lot. You are, most of us are in headlamps, and it's just a really tough race. It challenges so many different aspects of your running ability, the mountainous, the heat management. And if your stomach and your wits are still about you, the last third is still like punching you and pummeling you or trying to into submission. And then, when you have somebody like Sally, who is decides to add on a fourth element, which is running her first 100-mile race with a broken foot or no, broken leg. A broken leg. Yeah, just like for shits and giggles, like let's just throw one more like element in there, one more monkey wrench, and having a pacer who just came ill-prepared with one single handheld, runs out of water, and proceeds to take water from her runner who's running her 100-mile race. It's just like all these elements kind of set her up for failure. But Sally, being the person that she is, persevered, pushed through all those challenges, including a dubious stranger that she picked up from Chantry onto the finish as her pacer for some reason. Like,
oh my gosh,
she still persevered and ended up finishing her first 100-mile race, broken foot, broken leg, and all. So
fourth place, man.
I mean, that's Angeles Crest in a nutshell.
It is. So it's extreme heat, it's altitude, it is relentless exposure. It's, I think is it over 20,000 feet of climbing in that?
If not, it's close. Yeah.
Yeah. And then almost equaled it. I think the descent's about 18,000 feet of a descent. But Billy decided to show up on this raging hot summer day with one handheld of water, but he had a packable jacket, which this packable jacket was also a belt. So it looked like, like the old school, like bottle belts that people used to wear. I mean, I know people still wear them, but like that's what his belt was. It was like this strap and then this little pouch that was his jacket. And so he's running with his handheld. And mind you, he's pacing me for the marathon distance in the high country, fully exposed.
Oh,
and all of a sudden...
I ran that section shirtless, by the way. I did not need the jacket. So while I was prepared for like polar, like wintry conditions, what I wasn't prepared for was the actual heat of, what that section provided. So yeah, lesson learned. So again, kids.
We have a great picture. Billy, that is going to be the picture for this podcast.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about, obviously, because there wasn't that much photographic or video evidence. But yeah.
No. We came into an aid stage. This is so great. At the time, this is like only Angeles Crest was doing that. But you could come into the aid station before Chantry Flats. And Chantry Flats marks what?
75.
Yeah, Chantry Flats marks 75. So you're 25 miles from the finish. You're going to pick up your second pacer at this point. But the aid station right before Chantry Flats, they had this really cool setup with a video camera live feed. That
it was like Zoom before Zoom was a thing.
Yeah,
at Newcomb Saddle.
Yeah, Newcomb Saddle. You're right. So Newcomb Saddle aid station. And so everyone waiting at Chantry Flats could see when you come into the aid station and you could talk to them and you could wave. And so everyone could prepare, but it was just this really exciting moment. So there is this iconic picture of Billy and I, and it's like, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night, and he's shirtless with his empty water bottle.
No, okay. No. So for the people who may not look up this photo, I am wearing, so I'm not wearing a shirt, like I mentioned. I have this one handheld that was probably empty at the time or close to empty. And I'm wearing, I don't know if you remember what was on my head, Sally.
A headlamp.
But I had like a GoPro 2.
Did you?
Like the second iteration of a GoPro on my forehead.
Oh my gosh, do you still have that footage?
Yeah, I think I sent you a screenshot. You know, every now and again, I'll clean up my hard drives and I will send you random memories. Yeah. I'm sure I sent you like a screen grab or a video clip or something. But it's just, it's super shaky. And the whole time, it was kind of tilted up. So all I'm getting is like at the top of the back of your head.
So
some cinematographer I was.
Some Billy's filmmaking. So Billy has put out some incredible films over the years. I mean, films that are getting over 1 million views and are known worldwide. I mean, we just came back from UTMB. I could not believe how often you were stopped, Billy, and every person is like, your film's so inspiring, and everyone has their favorite. I know you have so many. If you're listening and you haven't checked out Billy Yang films on YouTube, please do. They are some of the most inspiring, beautiful films about our sport that always have a wonderful story with them. So, but it's so amazing to see how far you have come in your filmmaking journey from a GoPro 2 on your head, bouncing around, only getting the top of my head. And you used to do like these vlogs. See, when I met you, you were LA Runner. You were larunner.blogspot.com. Yeah. LA Runner on Twitter.
I was a blogger.
And people knew you as LA Runner too, because I remember even back then being with you.
There were like 2.5 people who knew who I was.
Come on.
The first time I was stopped and somebody actually called me LA Runner, I was like, oh my God, I made it.
But yeah,
if you want to, I have to double check and see if that is still up. Hopefully I'm still paying the domain fees. Yep, it's still up. larunner.com. For those of you guys, that's the one thing I will shamelessly plug because
I love it.
The last post was in April 23rd of 2015.
Well, our guests need to know this.
Yes.
That every great achievement comes with a lot of learning. A lot of rookie mistakes, a lot. And it's a long journey and I don't think people want to do that. I don't think people want to accept the fact that things take years to grow, like the foundation that you need to build something great. I mean, you don't, I think it's very rare that you hear of something overnight, they're overnight sensation. It's like, but were they really, did it really happen overnight? If we could go all the way back to when you first fell in love with the camera and filmmaking and creating, I mean, we'd go all the way back to your childhood.
Yeah.
We don't have to tell those stories, but it's true. Well, like you had that love for film for a long time.
And I never really connected that until semi-recently. And I realized there were all these, and I actually got some of them digitized. They were like really bad music videos that I would make in my living room with my buddies, or stupid sketches that we filmed in the backyard. I was always walking around with a video camera, and there's actually a picture of me in grade school holding my dad's Super 8 or whatever it was, just a giant janky piece of technology. Yeah, upon reflection, it was something that had captivated me. But, I think I attribute some of my success to just timing. Hard work, certainly behind the scenes, and this incremental success along the way is always the hero's origin story, right? You always have a lot of failure, or you have a lot of, just like the trails that we run, they meander, they drop, they go up, but it's never the straight line of like point A to B. And I think that is the valuable thing about ultra running in of itself, is that within, whatever your distance is, 50K to 100 miles, or in your case, 200 plus miles, it's not this linear path to success. There are ups and downs, there are failures, there are thoughts of wanting to give up and quit multiple times. But that is the hero's journey. And I think the more challenging it is, the more valuable that success, that accomplishment is ultimately. So, yeah, and in my case, Sally, I don't know if you and I have actually talked about this, but I never had that ambition, that the embracing the journey and the hardships and all that. I was the one seeking the shortcuts in life. I was the one looking for the hack. I was the one that was constantly deterred by, oh, you have to do all this work. Okay, well, I'm just not going to do it. So that is something, and hopefully there are people out there that can relate to this, because so many people out there, inspiring people like yourself and Cam Haynes and the David Goggins of the world, they not only accept it, they embrace it. And for me, I can't relate to people like that. And it is very antithetical to my natural being, which is just wanting to sit there and just hopefully let success come to me. And but that is the valuable lesson I've come to take away in ultra running, is that the journey is it. I mean, that is regardless of however successful you are in the sport, whether you're Jim Walmsley or someone fighting cutoffs, like it's all about the journey. It is all about overcoming. It is all about just doing something that challenges you. And I think, you and I had a talk. We just came back from Mammoth Trail Fest, this amazing 3-4 day event that Tim Tollefson put together. And I had the great fortune of being up on stage with Tim and Sally. And I just remember this really powerful line of just some, to the extent of like, the longer the distance gets, the more is revealed about who you are. And I just found that so poignant and so like dead nuts on. Like it is about embracing that journey, because more is revealed about yourself along the journey and along the path. So,
and I really do love that you bring that up, as far as like, and I do remember having this conversation with you. We had this conversation. I feel like we've had that conversation a couple times.
Okay.
Where I remember one time you had even said, I feel more like that I don't work hard, or that I am lazy. I was like, I don't think I would never describe you as that. But I also know that the way that we see ourselves, like sometimes we see ourselves very differently than the way the world sees us, or sometimes we see ourselves in such a way because we're comparing to the extremes. And so you look at someone like Goggins or Kames and you're like, even if I work hard, I still feel lazy because of what's around me and what I'm placing as the standard for myself. And I think that is like such a cool point of discussion, because, I don't think that there's one way for everyone, the same way to achieve a dream or to go about like writing their story and their journey. I don't think that it is supposed to be, every day you need to get up at 3 and go, 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 this high intensity, like never resting and always trying to push the envelope. I think that there's beauty in every unique story. Obviously, there's a platform where you can share as much as you want, Billy. I mean, I know so much of your story, and I think your story is so incredible, and what you have come from, what you have worked through, what you have seen, what you know. I mean, I think that's why you're such an incredible storyteller, because you have a heart that's able to empathize and with a lot of people. And I think also that's why what makes us like great friends, like you have a lot of depth to you, and I think it's good for people to hear that, hard work isn't about the intensity every single day. It's just about committing and not giving up on a dream. And staying committed and disciplined doesn't mean, I guess we can like equate this to like a running program. Like staying committed and disciplined doesn't mean you're doing a hard tempo run 7 days a week. That's not what it means. Like the commitment and the discipline means that you have recovery days, that you sometimes have to run easy, and sometimes you have to take a day off, and you have recovery seasons, and then you have days where you're pushing so hard, and at the end, like your bones and muscles are tired and you're exhausted. But the seasons come and they go. And I think that there are things that we know from the time that we're little, like we can look back on our lives and realize, wow, like I was passionate about that. And I love that from the time I was a little kid. Like when I think of you with the big camera and just creating and wanting to perform for your family, and even be able, you know how to play the guitar. Like, you have so many creative aspects about you, and the way that you can entertain a crowd, that really is a part of who you are. You've never strayed from that. But being
Yeah.
able to take all that and make a career out of it, to make something that then impacts the world around you. I mean, you've changed a lot of lives through your storytelling. You've inspired people to try things they never believed that they could do. And I think that's what's so incredible about, living your life authentically. I feel like today a lot of the messaging is like that you have to do these crazy physical things, that you have to do a big race. I heard someone on a podcast the other day that was like, everyone needs to do an ultra. And I was like, no, they don't. I don't even
No.
think everyone needs to run. Like, not
Well,
everyone can. Not everyone can do those things, like physically do those or afford to do those. Like, these are parallels to life. I think physical movement is great. Like, we want to be healthy, but telling someone that you can't get to the edge of yourself, or you can't find out who you are, you can't really like experience or go to that place unless you do an ultra. I feel like if a message is not something that can resonate with people all over the world, every walk of life and age, then it's weak.
yeah, and I do think that it's not a one size fits all. Like, to participate in the sport means you have to have this intensity and this undying ambition to get out the door every single day. I do. It's kind of weird. We have this love-hate relationship with the sport where I don't think many other things involves needing motivation or needing that initial push to get the momentum going, because as everyone who is an endurance runner out there knows, that first mile always kind of sucks, right? And it's always like, how is today's run gonna go? You just never know until your body starts to warm up and you're like, okay, well, today the workout, I feel strong, I feel great, and I'm gonna crush this workout. And there are days where you're just like, oh man, this warm up feels hard. How am I going to get through like a 1600 by whatever? It's just, it's a weird sport. And I can't tell you how many times, to your point, Sally, and thank you for mentioning all those or saying all those kind of things. One of the things that I hear often is like, wow, you inspire me to get out the door, or you inspire me. I watch your video before my 100-mile race all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, I don't need to watch a food vlog video before I sit down and eat, like mow down Las Vegas buffet. I do it because I just, I love food. So it is this like weird dynamic, right? Like on one hand, we feel really great and accomplished at the end of it, but at the same time, you need this little nudge, you need this push. And if I'm the person who provides that for you, that's fantastic. I mean, I never, ever tire of hearing that. I mean, again, this past weekend when people are telling me that they signed up for this 26K because they watched one of my videos, or they point at me and they say, you're the reason I came here, or the reason I'm trail running, is like, can there be a better compliment? There were a handful of people who were that for me, like Dean Karnazes being the first one, and then several other people that came after that. But yeah, to open the door to this amazing, amazing community. And I start with community first. I mean, the trails are awesome. Being in the mountains, being in nature, as everyone knows, is awesome. But the community, at least for me, is what keeps me coming back. So to be the gateway drug, if you will, to introduce people to this amazing sport. And now we can do it sort of at scale with YouTube and social media and all of that stuff is tremendous. Forget what forget what we were talking about that let me down here. But all this to say, like, I'm somebody who needs that too. I recognize that, and that was sort of my instinct in being sort of behind the camera and now a little more in front of the camera, is that I was missing that. I was definitely somebody who needs that. For all the Jocko Willnicks and the Cam Hanes and whatever, like, who are self-motivated and have self-discipline, I empathize with the other side. I'm the one that needs some sort of external pressure, whether it's the pressure of signing up for a race or the motivation of seeing someplace beautiful and wanting to explore somewhere beautiful myself. I'm that person. So when I speak and when I storytell, I'm kind of talking to those people.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that is what is important for people listening, that Yeah, there's a lot of messages out there that kind of make you feel like it's go hard, go home every single day.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing these wild, crazy, extreme physical ventures, then, what are you doing? Then you're not living. And it's just not true. Some of the hardest things that we do in life are taking care of our families, are being consistent, showing up for our job every day, knowing it's going to provide, for our family, or going to school every day and trying to get that graduate degree in order to fulfill that dream. And having hard conversations with maybe people where bridges have been burned. I mean, those are real life, really difficult situations that define so much of our character and who we are. Those are the things that impact the world, the way that we help our neighbor and the way that we interact with the community around us. And I think the racing and, training 4 hours in the gym, all those things, I mean, those are drawn out of one, maybe a love for physical activity and sport and the community that is surrounded within those sports. But I also believe that, for example, earlier this year, I did a challenge. It was a Choose Strong challenge, and it was for 30 days. Challenge yourself to move for 30 minutes a day. Now, I never said like, you need to run, 30 miles a day, or you need to lift, or you need anything. My whole point in doing that challenge was just to encourage people to get out and breathe in the fresh air. That
Yeah.
it doesn't, that the benefits of moving your body every single day, they don't really have to do with like the size of your jeans and how fast that you can run, or whether or not you can win a race, or if you're building up to a 100-mile race. But the feedback that we got from a lot of people was they were sharing it with their family. They were going out after dinner and going on walks with their kids. And I thought, man, that's incredible. That's the best part of movement. Movement in and of itself, it doesn't need to be surrounded by a race, but it does make your life better. You just feel better head to toe when you're able to get out and you go on a hike or a bike ride or a walk with a friend. Like, you just feel better breathing in that fresh air. When you're getting off the couch or you're having a bad day, get out into that sunshine. That really is the reason why I did that. Why I did
and
the
there's
Choose Strong
clear
challenge.
scientific evidence to point to the power of movement. And I can personally attest to some of my most creative moments are when I'm just with myself and with nature, and my head is clear.
100%.
And I can't tell you, there's so many times that I've had to stop and jot down notes or do a voice memo because my head is finally detached from social media, from just being on my phone constantly. I mean, ironically, I pull my phone out to jot down ideas, but I usually reserve it to that. And I usually am not, generally speaking, not listening to music, not listening to podcasts or anything, except for the Choose Strong podcast, of course. But there is actual scientific studies pointing towards just a dopamine release of movement. And so, and doing a challenge like that also breeds community, right? Like, everyone's in it together. You are in effect pulling this community together to tackle this one thing. And there's something powerful in that too. So, I'm just basically like supporting everything you're saying about these challenges and the power of movement. It is not about looking a certain way in front of a mirror. It's just about, feeling better about yourself. And that's certainly what I found in the sport as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as a coach, I even come at this from a coaching perspective, where sometimes we'll have athletes say, I just wasn't feeling it today. I lost my mojo, or I didn't have enough time. I couldn't get out the door. And sometimes I'll encourage those athletes. Not sometimes, I do. If they've lost out on like an 8-mile run and they're beating themselves up, I'll say, you know what? Forget the 8-mile run. I'd love for you just like go outside and walk for 30 minutes and just be quiet and be still. And as you move along, like, allow yourself to rest in the fact that you did something today and you care about this goal enough that you're upset about it. But sometimes all you need is just to kind of slow down and still move and allow your mind to think. And I think what's really cool when we do that is that later on down the road, it gives us that freedom and creativity to think, I wonder what would happen if I just like walked for 45 minutes, or maybe I'm going to start run walking. And I wonder what my body can do. And I think that a lot of times that's why people sign up for races. They're just curious. They don't believe that they could do a half marathon, but they're curious. And,
Yeah.
Sometimes personality types have a lot to do that too. The people that don't like to be rushed and put under pressure all the time and feel like that if it's go hard and go home, like sometimes you lose people that way. But a lot of times when people feel like they have the freedom to create their own path and come at it at their own pace, they end up loving it. They end up loving that journey because they do it in a way that's most authentic to them. And so I love this conversation just in and of itself, knowing that there's so many different ways that you can approach a journey. And you found running in the mountains, trail running after, a hard time in your life. And that became like a peaceful space for you. And now look what you're capable of doing. I mean, you do 100-mile races. You would have never thought you would be doing that.
Yeah. And I just want to piggyback off of what you said just now about, building good habits, building strong habits, building lasting habits. It's not this linear path like we were talking about, like the trails that we run, like the races that we run. You're going to have low moments. It's not like this continuous hockey stick up towards, your end goal, and it's going to be smooth sailing all the way. There are going to be days where you just don't feel like getting out there. But to quote the great Des Linden, you just have to keep showing up, right? In some way, shape, or form, you have to keep showing up. And that is that is just like the fundamental, whatever you call it, like the North Star of building a good habit and building a foundational habit that you will, you'll just keep showing up in some way, shape, or form, whether it's like your point, just lacing up your shoes and stepping outside the door, or like getting out and crushing a monster workout. It's just all about showing up. And it is something that for me took a long time to really fundamentally at my core understand, because when you were referencing a hard point in my life, our family tragically lost my dad to a very brutal botch robbery when I was at this very lost point in my life. I was in my late 20s. I was working at this 9-to-5 job where I was just like, it was completely aimless. I was living for the weekends. I was, smoking, drinking, womanizing, and just like had this very aimless existence where, like I was perfectly content to live this way until, I was 6 feet under. Like that was my only goal in life, was just like make it to the weekend. That was it. I didn't have any healthy habits short of, occasionally having a celery stick with my buffalo wings, just like nothing about my existence was like this person that you see in front of me, which again, I will forever remain a student and forever remain a work in progress. But that time even more so, I was far more removed from anything healthy habitually. And then when this sudden thing happened in our lives, it shook me to my fundamental core and did this complete reset in my head of having to find purpose and meaning to my existence. And this is where I think you and I have talked about this a lot, when you lost your mom very tragically in a not similar way, but in an equally tragic way. She was somebody that you really loved and looked up to, where you found inspiration and joy from, which you still radiate to this day. It is character building. It is okay, now what? Like you have a choice. You can sit there and feel pity and anger and shake your fists at the world, at the universe, at God, whomever you want to point the finger to, or you can do something about it. And it was for me a rewiring, if you will, of my fundamental way of thinking, of behaving, of trying to, again, like it is when I tell people, tell myself that it is when I became a man, in effect, because I realized that everything you do in life, the people that you're around, it all speaks to who you are. And I wanted to be somebody that was worthy of, in hindsight, in post-mortem, be somebody that he was proud of. And I've had quite several moments out there on the trails, in particular, at the tail end of a really tough ultra marathon, at the tail end of a really tough training run, where I've just like broken down and cried and like audibly talked to him. I'm not necessarily believe in a higher being per se, but it is when I feel the closest to him, because I'm just like, God, I wish you could see me now. You know, like here I am, just like completely the antithesis of your son that you knew here on earth. But God, I wish you could see me now. You know, just the fact that I'm out here, just the fact that I'm pushing myself. You know, when I was this aimless, just purposeless son that you've had, this, you know, black sheep, if you will, the middle child. And I'm out here, you know, at mile 85 of a 100-mile race, struggling to put one foot in front of the other. I'm just like, despite the hurt, despite the pain, I'm like, you would be so proud of me right now. And that was a huge catalyst in my life that knocked me off the trajectory that I was on. So it sucks when something tragic happens in your life, but we always have a choice, right? We always have a choice on how we show up the next day and how we choose to frame it. And in my case, I refuse to feel sorry for myself, refuse to feel sorry for my family. I was going to make his passing have meaning and honor him that way. And that's how I chose to do it.
And it's beautiful. I've never met anyone that lost a parent the way that you did.
This was at the time I was like, oh, these things happen to other people. This happens to other people on the news. There was like surreal moments where I was up there, and on one side is the mayor of LA, on the other side is the chief of police, and I'm there giving a press conference with news cameras everywhere. I'm going, this is not happening to us right now. This is what happens to other people. This is what we see on the local news or the national news, and you're just like, oh, that sucks. And then you go about your day, being with your family and being with your loved ones whenever you want. This does not happen to other people. So, I mean, this is all this to say, I definitely felt sorry for myself in the immediate aftermath of when it happened, because that coupled with just outright confusion and anger and all those things. It was just, once that went away, it was like, well, now what? You know, do you want to continue to feel this way, or do you want to do something about it and inject meaning into all this? And I think if there's one lesson that could be taken away from my story, is that no matter how hard things get, and certainly far more tragic things happen to other people, but regardless, we always have a choice. A choice in how we choose to respond and answer the bell, because giving up is not an option. It's just simply not an option.
So you were thrown into your whole world being flipped upside down. I mean, overnight, literally overnight. And that you also you had to make a lot of, you said you grew up. How old were you? You were 20.
I was 28 at the time.
28.
Yeah.
And you had to make some pretty extreme decisions because you picked up your dad's place at work. I don't think a lot of people know that.
Yeah. So that was one of the reasons why it had this impact on the community, because it's not something that happens generally in that part of town, or at least back then. It was like kind of Beverly Hills adjacent. It was in a really nice area. He had built this liquor store up from, it was his first business from 1985 on. And, he and my mom basically built it from scratch. And, it was one of the quintessential immigrant stories, but allowed us to move from a poverty-stricken, I came to this country when I was 6 years old, didn't know a lick of English, and still definitely have that part of me where I'm just like the kid that doesn't quite fit in. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he built this business up from scratch and allowed us to live more of a middle class life. And when this happened in the brutal way that it did, and just like a week before Christmas, a Saturday morning like every other, I was, of course, like hungover from a Christmas party from the night before. I just like slept with one of my office, coworkers, and I stumbled home late that night, and I was in bed when my phone kept ringing. I did try going back to work like a month later, and then I just realized, I remember sitting in my cubicle and just like crying, going, what am I doing here? My family needs me. And so, yeah, I effectively quit my job and just took over the family business for the past, I don't know, like however many years, like close to a decade, I think, if not more.
I remember having conversations with you while you were watching the Laker game sometimes there. And you made a lot of sacrifices by being there. I know that wasn't, the top place that you wanted to be. And you always had to work on Sundays. I remember that.
Sunday nights, yeah.
Yeah, Sunday nights. Yeah, you always had to be home. So like, and when you were also then, gosh, I think when I met you, that's when slowly you started to make films and things like that. But
yeah,
you'd film on Saturday, and then you always had to make sure that you were home on Sunday to,
I was always
be at the store
tethered to the business.
Yeah.
So this jet setting lifestyle, if I had any of it, it had to be confined to a few days, and instead of like weeks, I get to do now, which I'm eternally grateful for. To this day, I still kind of sort of have that dread for Sundays when everyone else relished Sundays. Like Sunday was always my Monday. And it was always that day that I just I had this like low level dread every time days kind of led up to the Sundays. Yeah. It's no longer around, thankfully. And my mom was able to retire, and, now I get to do what I love full time.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people can relate to this, where they're raising a family, they have family commitments, or they're in school and they're trying to pursue what they love. And it can be frustrating because you're kind of split in two. You're pulled towards your responsibility in one area, but you really want this freedom to do what you love full time. And you had to figure out how to chip away at both those things. You had to figure out how to chip away at what you love while being all in on the family business, and really essentially taking your dad's spot without being asked, without any warning. I mean, it was everything. Your whole entire life changed so quickly. But I'd love for you to share a little bit within that season how you found the LA mountains, because you were not a runner.
No, I was not. And
you rode your bike a lot.
Yeah, I had my motorcycle, and that was definitely one of the post his passing, like, I'm going to live my life to the fullest. And that certainly scratches an itch, but it certainly didn't, I never found community through it. The running part, I've told this a couple times in the past, but to fast track the story, in the process of trying to find purpose, I thought I would apply to become a police officer, LAPD. And if anybody knows me, that is like the worst idea in the world. Like, imagine me being a cop, right?
No, I remember being very shocked when you told me this story. I was like, you?
Yeah, right. But the press at the time, they were still very much connected to our family and our family story and the outcome, and they loved it. I do believe a couple of articles were written about it. Son of murdered victim to become a cop, like it was very sexy, like kind of a Bruce Wayne, Batman-y, headline. But
I love how you parallel it with the movie too.
Yeah, but it's just like, and I was like, okay, I found my purpose now. I'm going to become a cop, and then I'm going to become a homicide detective for a little bit, and then I'm going to get into politics. Like, that's going to be my new career path. It just quickly became evident through going through the process that I was not cut out for this. I had too much shit in my past that drew too many red flags. Okay, I said I would fast track this story. Basically, I knew I had to get my ass in shape. And to do that, I had to give up smoking, and I had to figure out how to run. Cardio was definitely not my strong suit, but I was like, okay, I got to get in shape. So I remember being at the store, and anytime I craved a cigarette, I would just like take a quick break and just sprint around the block as fast as I could. And then, come back to my shop completely drenched in sweat and out of breath. And like, okay, at that point, the cigarette was the last thing I wanted. And then, so that was kind of like the start of something.
Is that how you quit? Was that your remedy? Was that your nicotine patch?
It was one of the methods. Yeah. And
That's
then
amazing. I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
That's so great. When you want a cigarette, just sprint around the block and like you're gonna be so
and just
nauseous.
like run it out of your system.
I love it.
But it really wasn't until I met a good friend of mine, Charles, who was actually at my wedding. So
Yeah.
maybe you met him,
Easier.
maybe you didn't. But he was
Yeah.
he was he was a gym buddy of mine back at this gym that was right next door to the office that I worked at. And he's just somebody I met, and we became friends, and he suggested we train for a half marathon. So I was like, half marathon, how long is that? So I look it up, it's like 13 miles. I'm like, oh man, that's insane. So I remember I was like sort of on the fence, and the only thing that really made me feel good about signing up and committing to it was looking at photos. It's gonna make me sound like such an asshole, but I looked up race photos from the previous year at the Pacific Shoreline, now Surf City Half Marathon.
Yes.
In your hood in Huntington Beach. I remember seeing these people who had clearly, looked a little more, I don't know, like non-athletic than me, like running and competing. So I was like, all right, if they could do it, I could do it. So I signed up. And so we committed, I did commit to it, and, we trained like 4 to 6 miles on runs. And it was just like, it was extremely hard, but I committed to the process of training for it. And I remember the weekend before. So the race takes place in February. I remember the weekend before, it was objectively cold in LA. Yeah. And I lived in West LA at the time.
Coastal cold is cold. Come on. It is.
Yeah. It was like 30 degrees.
Yeah.
And I told myself, to fully feel confident about running 13.1 miles, I needed to step my game up. So I mapped out this route in West LA, and I remember running, I think it was about 8 or 9 miles the weekend before. And
that's stepping up your game.
It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I remember, thanks to Dean Karnazes and Ultra Marathon Man, now I could eat whatever the hell I wanted. And I remember walking into a Carl's Jr., which for those of you guys,
you ran 8 or 9 miles.
Yeah, for those of you guys who don't know, it is like a fast food place in Southern California. And I ordered a double bacon cheeseburger with French fries and a root beer. And the poor guy behind me had to hear all about how much I just ran, and now I could eat whatever I wanted. I was quite proud of myself. It was like one of those moments in life that I definitely remember to this day. So
you burned 500 calories. You ate 2,500 calories.
Oh, now I could just pull a Dean Karnazes and eat like greasy cheeseburgers and French fries and be okay. But yeah, fast track to that half marathon. I just remember at like mile 10 or 11, as you're approaching the final straightaway, I remember the sun was in my eyes, and I just had this, what's commonly referred to as a runner's high. And it was a very emotional moment for me. I remember like crying. I remember I just felt like I was floating. And that was when I just like something clicked in me. I said, this endurance stuff I can get behind. I see it. The journey, the process, embracing all of it to this final celebration of running the race. I see it. And then shortly thereafter, after I finished that race, even though I couldn't possibly imagine doing 2x that distance, I signed up for the LA Marathon, which was a month after that. And I just wanted to keep the momentum going. So yeah, that was back in 2007 now. My God, that was a long time ago. Yeah. LA Marathon. And then the rest, as they say, is history. And then a year after that, I found trail running, and just discovered this whole other side of the sport. Discovered that there was nature in Los Angeles, surprise, surprise, and and I just found this community, and it's been amazing ever since.
It's funny because my first half marathon was Pacific Shoreline, Surf
Was
City,
it? Yeah.
And then my first marathon was LA Marathon. Yeah. I mean, those were like the big races. There's so many races now. They're still iconic in Southern California, Surf City and LA. I mean, you can't go wrong signing up for either of those races. But
to tell myself in that moment that now you would be involved in running 50Ks,
right?
100Ks, 100 milers, you're like, get the hell out of here. What are you talking about? Who does that, first of all? And second of all, like me? No.
Yeah.
No way. But
It's super cool to hear where you started, to hear the journey that you had and how your life once was. I mean, I think a lot of people listening can either directly empathize with you and or even indirectly, whether they know people that you, it's really easy to feel stuck in your life, that you're like, well, this is just kind of like my life, or even feel stuck like in a small town where you're like, this is just what we all do. Like
yeah,
you don't go outside the lines, or
yeah,
I'm not the kind of person that could ever do that, or I just don't have what it takes, or I just don't have the time, or just not today. And but yet kind of having deep inside this yearning to try something new, or to get out of that rut, or to challenge yourself. And your story is pretty powerful because you have lived many different lives. You've tried a lot of different things. And yeah, you weren't the kind of kid that just like went to school and knew you wanted to be a lawyer, and like so then you did that thing in college, and all this very like straight smooth career path, and had a family and 2 kids. It's like there was a lot of crazy stuff going on.
yeah.
Um,
And
and
sometimes like accidentally stumbling, as I'm wont to do, upon like a sport or upon a career. It is really about these choices that we make in life and how we decide to really, yeah, I guess for lack of a better term, make lemonade out of lemons. And
mm,
you're somebody who's no stranger to that too. And just I think that's what's so powerful about your story and your origin story, if you will, in
mhm,
reading your latest novel or your first novel, is that everyone has a story, an origin story, where so many times you could have given up, or so many times you
mhm,
could have just taken incredible pity on yourself, and nobody would really push back against that.
yeah.
But it really is about the choice that you decide to make, that you can use that either as fuel, you can use that to be, and then hopefully, people listening out there will just find your book instead of having to go through the crucible of your unfortunate childhood. I say unfortunate loosely though, because I want to be careful about, it is a part of your story. It is
Mhm,
what made you you. It is, I think, to read that book helps people understand, oh, this is why this girl can go through the depths of hell in a race that she voluntarily chose to do, because there were
mhm,
all these involuntary things that she had to participate in and experience,
mhm,
much like myself in much
mhm,
different ways,
mhm,
that provided this outline and this blueprint for who you ultimately became. And
mhm,
so I'm not saying necessarily to embrace that, or you have to take a bunch of shit to become this badass on the other side of it. But hopefully you can see a piece of content or read Sally's book or hear Sally talk, which again, like this past weekend, I'm her friend, I've heard her stories, but to still hear you talk, like I just want to like run through a brick wall, because Sally is just that person who is all about not just using her story to get the best out of herself, but using her story to get the best out of everyone else that she comes in contact with. And now you're doing it at scale through this podcast, through the book, through the video content. And I'm just like proud papa over here, just
Oh,
like overjoyed at the success that you've had and are continuing to have.
thank you, Billy. I so appreciate that, and very, very lucky to have you as a friend. And I think I think that's what's been so cool about our friendship is we do both understand extremely difficult times. And we found running in 2 totally different ways. And I think what I was trying to explain earlier too is that for some people, they live pretty much they've lived like a smooth, awesome life. They've had an amazing family. They have a great job. And so it's very easy to also feel like, well, this is just the way it is. And I'm not saying there's anything negative about that. Like, I think we should love the life that we're in and feel comfortable in the story that we are writing. And it doesn't need to be like, it doesn't need to have extreme elements to it.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes when I talk to people that is what they're looking for. And so many times it's why they sign up for an ultra. Well, I feel like I have to have something extreme. I have to experience like this really extreme, intense pain or discomfort. And so I need to do all these, different things in order to experience that or for my life to be valid. And I think what is the most powerful thing we do is just live authentically in the life that you're in now.
Yeah.
But always knowing that if you desire to try something new, if you have like that passion for something, you can choose to pursue that, but you can do it in a way that is authentic to you. When I was saying earlier, like, there's people that they grow up in a great family and like they have supportive people and like they want to get that college degree and like they become a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher or they want to raise children. They want to be a stay-at-home mom. Like there's so many different things that we are all passionate about doing. And I think that we can still find fulfillment and we can impact the world around us, even if it's just one person in our life. It could be our neighbor, it could be our children. And I don't think that we have to live a life of extremes. We don't have to do these crazy things. I actually told this story on the Cam Hanes podcast, how I go, my mom loved being a mom. She had 5 kids. She would have wanted more kids if she could have. She didn't have social media. She didn't have a ton of friends. She was a little more quieter, a little bit more introverted, a little bit more shy. But I realized that because of the way that she loved her children, the way that she loved me, the way that she spoke truth to me, I've carried that legacy on. I've been able to carry that message on, like her strength in faith, being courageous to stand in her faith, being brave enough to speak about her faith. Like, I think that all those things impacted my life. And I realized, wow, because she impacted me, I'm able to share those stories with people through my content and around the world. And so I think that is so important to speak about, that when you live your life that's true to you, it doesn't mean that you have to go on these crazy expeditions up Mount Everest and that you have to have 1 million followers. It is really living in that vein of like what you know to be true of yourself, what you feeling, living out the gifts and the talents that are unique to you, finding your heart's passion and feeling that. And sometimes that is just with a few people around you, and that's what I love. I think that's why I love that you're a storyteller, because you love to tell a lot of people's stories through your documentaries. And again, I can't stress that enough for people listening, that if you want to be inspired, watch Billy Yang's films.
If
and
you want to be
one...
inspired, just consume all things Sally McRae.
You have a film on your Western States, which I think is your most popular film.
Leadville, probably. The Y.
Oh, is it The Y? Okay. But you also
Leadville.
have a Western States.
Yeah.
Okay. Leadville's your most popular film?
Well, it's probably the most viewed, and certainly the most
viewed.
But that was a very deliberate deliberate mission on my end, was that I wanted to stop talking to the people in our community who get all the shorthand references to, states and 100 miles. Yeah. Running 100 miles is just a common thing to us. It's like every other weekend in the summer, Yeah. And then really try to approach it from the lens of, the first timer or the significant other who sees their husband and wife constantly gone for 5 or 6 hour stretches or sometimes more every weekend. And that's the people I wanted to connect with and speak to. I was just thinking, as you were talking about people's stories and their passions, and I was just thinking about how amazing our sport is. And I do, again, like coming from just this past weekend of the Mammoth Trail Fest, which is very, to Tim's credit, very community focused and very, it's not about the elites.
He did such a great job.
Every single, you just felt the love. And I had front row seats, sort of, being able to hand out medals to each and every finisher. And that was like such a cool experience. And to meet all these people I cheered my ass off for every single person, because as they were coming in, you just saw the stories written on their faces. And, it just, and in some of the stories that they shared at the finish line, it was just like such a powerful thing. And it's like, but to get back to what I was thinking when you were talking, was like, how amazing is this sport that you can literally, on one hand, you could be running next to a former drug addict who was like living on the street or is currently living out of their van or their truck or whatever, and also running next to like a Fortune 500 CEO, somebody who's pulling in 6-7 figures. And yet we're all like embarking on this journey together. There's something really amazing about that I hate the whole painting, I won't get into the politics of it, but just painting people in the same brush, like, oh, these are all privileged people without stories, or they all have the same story. Like, you have no earthly idea. You presume a lot about these people as like entitled, privileged, getting to do this, that have hundreds of dollars in disposable income, don't have any hardship in their life. No, a lot of these people are running towards hardship for a variety of reasons. And to presuppose their story or their intentions, it's just, it gets me, it genuinely makes me angry, because every freaking person has their own story and has their own reasons and their whys of showing up to the start line. So anyway, you know how I get about some of my rants, Sally, and I'm going to pause myself there, but I just want to say, to highlight the positive side of this community, it is that we all get to do this, no matter how fast or how slow. We all do this because we have this one objective, and the community component of it is what keeps us coming back. And it's such a cool aspect of it.
You're right. And I think what's neat about the community, I had said this earlier, because a lot of our listeners, they love to be involved in the community as volunteers, as spectators, as crew, as pacers. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful, is you don't have to be on the race line. I think people are seeing that when you have time out on the trails with someone for 3, 4, 5, 20, 30 hours, it's amazing the conversations that come out when you don't have these distractions, when as you start to wear down, you don't have anything to hide who you really are.
Oh, and there's something actually, I think there's like a study done about not being like directly, you're not sitting across from someone at a Starbucks and like looking them eye to eye. There's something about like being side by side, not making direct eye contact. Again, like going back to your and my story, we hit the ground running on our first run post PCT 50, where we just like bared our souls to one another because it was at night, we had headlamps on, but we were running side by side. Anyway, sorry, I just want to inject that real quick.
I love that. And I say that to people all the time. I'm like, when was the last time that you were able to even go out to coffee with a friend and you talked for 5 hours straight uninterrupted?
Yeah.
I think that people realize when they come into the world of endurance sports, it's in many times, my favorite part is the training because of that. Like I go out and train and it's like, we go run in the mountains. I remember, especially in the beginning days when our whole crew, Dave and Colin and Josh and Ethan, like we'd spend like 5 hours in the mountains and we would talk the entire time. And when you have a lot of days like that, where it's uninterrupted, you really get to know who you're running with. And then you transfer that into a race. I mean, I'll never, ever forget, ever. Like Sean O'Brien, when I got my golden ticket to Western States and all you guys were there. And then my first Western States, when I got into that top 10, all you guys were there. And the stories and the support that came out of that, I won't forget that forever. That's the best part. I don't know what my pace was and all that. Like it was like the stories and the support that came out of that. And I think that people long for that. People want to belong. They want to feel like they're important. They want to feel loved and to be a part of something. And, when you have friends that truly know you and they see you in your weaknesses, they see you when you look ugly and gross and they're hugging you and cheering you on. And they listen to you when you're doubting and you're hopeless, and they're telling you that they believe in you and that they see you and they know that you're strong. I mean, my first years in ultra running, it was really learning a lot about friendship and the power of friendship, and how when you surround yourself with people that believe in you, truly believe in you and want the best for you. I mean, it kind of makes you feel like you're unstoppable. But then to take that and transfer that into your real everyday life, that's why you see a lot of these endurance athletes, like they're like best friends in everyday life, because wow, these are people that I can trust, that I know I've spent a lot of time with. Like I really know who they are. And yeah, so I'm really grateful for, for that in and of itself. But I think that being a part of community, no matter what that is, I mean, we could talk about the pickleball community. My father-in-law, he plays pickleball every day. I know, right? Like that community is like so incredible. Like he looks forward to it. Like he's made so many friends. Like he has so much fun. That there's so many different sports. But you think about, okay, what is it like? What draws people to being outdoors and doing an activity? And it's like so often it's the people that are there. It's the training, it's the conversations that are shared. It's going to dinner afterwards, it's getting food and drink afterward and just sitting around and talk about what you just did. Yeah, there's a really strong pull there.
Well, there was that film that I made.
I've never played pickleball, by the way.
I have. I kind of get it. And I'm sure there are amazing people in pickleball, but there's amazing people everywhere. I do think that was a huge component of what people were actually like fundamentally, we were like during COVID, for instance, there was this whole, the events were canceled, sure. But I think fundamentally what people longed for was that connection. And I'm not talking about through computers. I'm talking about real in-person connection and community. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those things that, God forbid we go through anything like that again, that we have to remind ourselves that this is not a optional, that we're just like foregoing for a time. It is essential to who we are as human beings. Find things, commonalities, finding people that see you instead of just like two strangers walking by each other who see you and who has a reaction, who you can hug in person, who you can sweat and share miles with, or a game of pickleball. It is that we can't overlook and we can't forget about. And I did make a video talking about this one study that this doctor did a like multi-year study on like what makes for a happy life, and number one was community. And I think that whatever it is, to Sally's point, whatever your niche is, whatever your passion is, like it does still come down to people and human beings and the connections that we make. And that's why I could run 100 miles by myself, crewless, pacerless, but I choose not to, because, and I, to people who want to do it, more power to them. But I like creating memories. I like having this shared experience with people. Born out of COVID, it was this adventure club that I created with along with another coach, because we realized, people don't care about wanting to be at a race to run a fast time. People want to show up to a race for that shared community. And so, there are a lot of bad things to come from COVID, but there were certainly a lot of good things that come out of COVID. And one of the things that still to this day, we mark our calendar, and it's about a dozen to 20 plus of us who has this shared adventure that we say, this is what we're going to do this year, and we're going to do it together. And it doesn't really matter how fast or slow you do it, but it's just about that shared experience. And so just the power of community, and to zoom out even more about the ultra running community as a whole, it is about the shared experience. It is about the sweat and blood and tears that we share out on the trails. It's not about how fast or slow or how many miles you run. It could be 26K, it could be hill ascent, or it could be a 50K plus. And I think it's just all about that. Doing it together is what makes it truly special. And that's why our sport is so amazing.
Absolutely. I can't ever imagine not being a part of the ultra and endurance community. Yeah. I mean, it's we're in it for life. And whether we're racing or we're putting out content or we're commentating or standing on a stage or coaching, pacing, crewing, volunteering, there's so many ways that you can be a part of it. But I totally agree with you. I love that the community is deep. You can travel all over the world and you're going to find ultra runners, you're going to find trail runners, you're going to find, people that just love to get out there and grind with each other.
And certainly it is a little bit different for you who does this professionally. And so you can't just be like, I don't care where I finish. Yeah, it's very important to what you do. But when shit hits the fan or when you don't quite have the day that you are expecting or wanting or thinking you're deserving of based on your training, what are you left with? It's about the journey. It's about the people that you go on that journey with. And even for an elite athlete like yourself, that there's still, commonalities and through lines in what we're discussing, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I think, I had said earlier that I wanted to ask you about what makes a great crew and pacer.
The whole thesis of this. Yeah. Or the topic of this
but
talk.
This has been, I would not change it. I love this so much. And I'm so excited for people to hear your story and just who you are, Billy. But I also think we can throw in like some fun points, but I do think through our experience, you and I, even if we've done enough pacing and crewing, but we've been around the sport for so long. Like we've witnessed and heard a lot in the ultra community. So being at races all over the world. And I think that pacing and crewing, it really comes down to the personality of the athlete too, and where they are, what their expectations are, what their goals are, what they're trying to do, because people definitely have their different styles that they like, like I talk to athletes and they're like, I want a pacer that's going to talk the entire time. And then I meet other people that are like, I want them to be quiet the whole time and just like run in front of me. And, it's just really interesting to hear what people do and don't like. But I do think that there's a few like fundamental things that if you are looking to crew or pace someone for the first time, or you just want to improve in those areas, that there's a few key points or things that we could kind of highlight. And I thought you would be a great person to do that with, because you filmed a lot of this. You filmed a lot of your story, but like a lot of stories of athletes all over the world for a long time. And you're always in the community. So I would love to hear from you, Billy. What do you think, before we talk about pacers, what do you think makes a good crew chief?
I will certainly answer that in a second, but I think if you're telling me your audience is, makes up of ultra runners, runners, and maybe people not in the sport, maybe we could set the stage for what is a crew, like the role of a crew and a pacer. So how would you define a ultra running crew / pacer?
Yeah, typically, and I'd say at most races in the United States, at ultra distance events, which is a distance beyond the marathon distance, you can have crew. And crew can be one person. It can be 3, 4, 5 people. Typically you only need one person's great, but it's fun to have a couple people out there on crew because it makes it fun for the crew. And what they will do is they'll carry maybe specific nutrition or clothes or extra socks, maybe some medical stuff. They're also there to encourage you if you hit a low point. But crew can typically only be at aid stations. Yep. And so they go to designated aid stations and they're there to assist you. Crew is not necessary to do an ultra, but there are advantages to it. So if a race says that you can have it, it is nice to have a crew, a familiar face out there. And we say crew chief because if you have, let's say, 4 people in your crew, the crew chief is like the leader. It's the organizer, the one that's going to be calling the shots and making the decisions to really keep everything structured and organized. Did I do a good job, Billy?
Yeah, I think so. And the role of a pacer, I think you covered it pretty well. To get into really quickly the role of a pacer, I would say, which is something probably far more common here in the States in Northern America. I don't know about South America, but
a lot of international races do not let you have pacers.
You have to cover the entire distance on your own. A pacer is essentially, it's not somebody who is necessarily setting the pace. I do think it's a bit of a misnomer. It's more of a race companion. It's hopefully it's a friend, or in your case, for your first 100, a complete stranger, who is there to accompany you, who's there to essentially remind you to eat, to drink, to hopefully keep you on
path.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and make sure that you are engaged in the experience and not bitching and moaning too much, hopefully, and hopefully not trying to convince a pacer to give up. Generally speaking, I believe most races, pacer is a lot more common in a 100-mile plus race, and you can pick them up after a certain distance, where the runner, the racer themselves might get a little loopy, might start bonking a bit, and the pacer is just basically there to essentially run stride for stride, keep the runner engaged, like I said, and well fed and fueled, and and just share the experience with. So that is the role of a pacer. To go back to your original question, what makes for a good crew chief? I would say you have to be, if you're the runner and you are in the decision-making process of this, you have to, select someone who has strong organizational skills. And I have had the whole spectrum of experience. And when I see somebody who shows up with a spreadsheet, who is asking the right questions in the pre-race meeting, that's when you know you have a good pacer. And crew chief rather. And somebody who is not afraid to take the reins. To your point, if you have multiple people out there who have their own little, why don't you try this? Or like too many chefs in the kitchen. This is a person who says, hey guys, back off. Like, this is what we're going to do at this aid station, and go from there. So just having that one voice to help manage the situation if things go haywire. And, in your case, Mr. Eddie McRae, who is probably, hopefully behind the scenes listening to this, somebody that I've come to admire a lot just from showing up to some of your 200 plus mile races, because he is just like that calming presence of he just shows up, he knows exactly what to do. And if things aren't working, as you had previously discussed, knows how to pivot, knows when to allow you to sleep, when not to allow you to sleep, knows when to push you, when not to push you. And he does it with this very calming and steady Eddie presence. And so you want somebody like that. I don't necessarily recommend your significant other always being crew chief, because it's like oil and vinegar, baby. Like when shit hits the fan, and both of them, if there isn't one calming presence to counteract the other, then it's going to be a shit show, and you're going to end up resenting each other. Same thing with the pacer.
Yes.
So I would say, just somebody who doesn't mind sitting there staring at the same path, waiting for the runner to emerge. Somebody who is good at organizing, somebody who is, just that steadying presence that you need to get you through to the finish line of a 100+ mile race.
Yeah, those are all wonderful points. I would have said the organization as well. I think that is key, especially if your runner's coming in. And generally, unless there's something wrong, your goal is to get your runner in and out of the aid station as quickly as you can, because there's nothing worse than someone not making a cutoff by 2 minutes or 5 minutes or that's the worst. And sometimes it can be because there was disorganization in an aid station, not really identifying what it is that you need, or kind of just like hanging out too long. And so the crew chief needs to be a bit on top of not only what the runner needs, but timing. I know for me, one of my pretty consistent requests over the years has been, 2 minutes or less in the aid station. I usually like 90 seconds or less, but at maximum 2 minutes. Now, when I'm in a spot that I require medical attention, then obviously we need to do everything that we can to make the body feel better before we leave. But when you have a good crew chief that can really understand you, they know your goals, so they keep your goals at the forefront instead of how you're feeling at a particular, you might have just a low point, but if you're physically fine, they're going to be like, yeah, you don't feel good. Get out of here.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Sally. You do have to play sort of the part of a sports psychiatrist or psychologist.
Yeah.
And, I'm thinking back to my own experience at Wasatch where I had this entire list built up in my head to where once I told Hillary all these reasons why I should drop, she's going to let me drop. And guess what?
Yeah.
She would have none of it. She said, unless you're timed out or unless I see a femur sticking out of your body, you're getting to that finish line. And it is important to do it with, depending on the runner, again, like knowing what works for them, having the right amount of compassion, but not too much compassion. You can't be like, oh, that hurts. Okay. Well, you should drop. No.
Yeah.
Like
that happens a lot though.
That happens a lot. That's why you have to know the crew chief. You have to pick the right person. You have
to understand the sport and how it goes. Like lows are part of it. So I'd say the crew chief needs to understand that your runner will have a low point, even if they're super fit and fast. Like it is literally a part of the race is for them to come in bonking, tired, crying, vomiting. Like, yeah, it's part of it. Get them out of the aid station.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless
this sounds so ruthless.
Unless it's something potentially like long-term, rhabdo, God forbid, or something like that. Like you're fine. You're dealing with the low. Everyone's going to have a low. You're just having it right now. So guess what? Like, if you're feeling good, guess what? Just wait. And things will change.
Yeah. If you guys want to hire me and Billy as your crew chiefs, you can. For the low price of $999, we will come out and we will yell at you in every aid station.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to pivot over to a pacer, it is more or less the same thing. You're going to hear obviously a lot more bitching and moaning. Sometimes, the runner's going to feel amazing and may want to push the pace, but you have to also kind of calibrate and see where they're at in the course of a race to know when to push them, when not, and when to pull on the reins a little bit. But generally speaking, and I think if I'm speaking to more of the mid to back of the pack, you're going to be trying to do everything you can to prod them along.
And stay positive, which is very hard because. Go ahead, Billy.
No. And I was just going to talk about the stomach component of it when things start to rebel and when they don't want to take in calories, like they told you and they insisted and they said at the pre-race meeting, no matter what I say, no matter how much I protest, make sure I eat and drink enough. And then, sure enough, 10, 15 hours into the race, they're like, no, it sounds awful. I'm going to puke it up. Like you're going to have to deal with that and you're going to have to constantly problem solve. And that is a part of the sport. It just is.
So I would say so far, if we were making a list, our crew chiefs are organized. They are zeroed in on the runner's goals beforehand and they stick to them the entire race.
Yep.
They're ones who are okay with confrontation and calling the shots with all their other crew members. And they know how to give a little tough love so that you can reach the goal that you originally came there for.
Yeah.
And then pacers, they got to be good at staying on course. I think that's one of the biggest things. There's nothing worse than hearing when a pacer and the runner go off course. Yeah. You're like, oh my gosh, the pacer is the fresh one. Fresh legs, fresh mind. And so it's easy, especially if you have a really good friend and you're just settled into like the best conversation ever. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen a marker in a mile. Yeah. I think we're off course, right?
And also not freaking out because there will be sections depending on how the course is marked. But that's when like you can rely on something like a map or a GPX that you've preloaded for your section, and you can reassure your runner that you are indeed on course. We've had that a couple times at Tahoe. I didn't say it in the moment, but there were a couple of moments where I didn't get that confidence marker, and I was just like, oh shit, and then I would look down at my watch. And I'm like, okay, I think we're still good. And then we see one. I'm like, see, Sally, we're on course. Told you this whole time. Be confident. And inside, I'm like, oh, thank God.
Well, 200s have less markings just anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is easy to feel that. But I think you're right. Like when we started in the sport, Billy, they didn't have like the downloadable maps for our phones and the GPS trackers. And
in our day, we had to print out a map. Open up a Thomas guide.
Like it was so long ago. But that really is popular just in the past few years, I feel like everyone feels like, okay, I can get on the Gaia map map or the topo map, and like I feel like I can see my dot, I'm following on the course. And so that is a huge advantage. But yeah, pacers need to understand where, you should probably carry with you or screenshot off of the website the aid station chart. Like how far to the next aid station? How many times does a tired runner ask you, how far to the next aid station? I mean, to an annoying degree.
Yeah.
And so for you to know that is really powerful. Staying on course is powerful. Make sure they're eating and drinking, but also knowing their personality and when to speak and when just to stay quiet. I think that's hard sometimes for pacers. I mean, I remember I had someone one time that was like, dude, I'll totally pace you. Like I tell the best stories. Like I will keep you fired up the whole time. And I'll just like, and I was like, dude, no, like that is not my style at all. Like, and Billy, you've paced me enough hours to know that like I can be very chatty and engaged and you can really get me going. And then there's other times where I'm like, I'm not talking to you.
Yep.
Don't tell me when to eat. I'll eat when I want to eat.
I just paced and crewed my now wife Hillary at I Am Tough.
Mm-hmm.
I did make one almost crucial error, which was I didn't quite think of it. Was okay. So to set the context or the stage, it was like mile 56. It was the heat of the day. The only thing in my mind, sorry, not 56. It was like mile 30 something. The only thing in my mind was ice bandana. How do I cool her down? Make sure she has ice in all her bottles, and it was just like heat management. That's the only thing in my mind. What I didn't factor in was the next time I would see her wouldn't be for another 26 miles. There is potential that she is going to have to do some of those miles in the dark. So she left without a headlamp, which is a critical error on both of our parts, to be fair.
Oh my gosh.
Because she didn't have it on the spreadsheet, but I should have factored that in. So you have to sort of expect the unexpected. There may be sections where it could be really, really hot, but they're going into the night and they'll need layers or they'll need a headlamp in my case. So you have to be on top of those things and think on behalf of the runner and think sort of a few steps ahead before just like, certainly you have to take care of their immediate needs, but you have to think about what they're going to face for the next several miles before you can see them again.
Yeah, that is how many of us have forgotten a headlamp or a headlamp has died while out in a race or even just in training. That's pretty critical. That's happened to me several times that I now carry these little clip-on lights that I've gotten from Amazon. You get 2 for like $12, but they are so bright and very light. And it is always in my pack just from the start all the way to the finish. It's just a backup little light that I know if my headlamp goes out or I'm going to have that little clip-on light and I can put it on my waist or on the strap of my pack. But yeah, checking for gear, having like a gear list and going over, what gear is going to be needed for what section. But I think what's critical too is knowing that all the projected times that you think that your runner is going to get into an aid station, something really bad can end up happening. And it's like, wow, we didn't think they'd need a headlamp here at all because they were moving so well. And then suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, they totally needed a headlamp for that section and we didn't give it to them.
Or wind jacket or rain gear. Like you just have to think on behalf of the runner and you have to think a few, it's a few steps ahead for sure on behalf of the runner.
Yeah. Communication overall between crew and pacers before the race is going to be one of your most important components to helping your runner get to the finish line and asking just some of the most basic questions. When you're low, how do you like people to talk to you? When you are feeling sick and nauseous, what works best for you?
Yeah.
I like just to think of every possible thing that can go wrong. And as a crew chief, I bring everything. I bring nausea medicine. I bring a blister pack. I bring peppermints and ginger chews because both those things can help with a sick stomach. And I try to think of every possible error and obstacle that my runner is going to encounter. And I bring something for all of that. And then you communicate with the runner. What are your top 3 goals that you want to do out here? Is it that you just want to finish? Do you want to place on the podium? Do you want to get a better time than you did last year if it's a race that they've done before? What's the best way to pace you? What do you like? Do you want me to talk the entire time? And I always try to let the runner know, listen, you can speak to me any way you want. However you are out on the trails, we leave it on the trails. So if you get bitey with me, don't feel bad later on or think that you've offended me. I 100% understand. And I think that's good. It gives the runner a lot of relief and grace going into the race when they know, like, okay, I told you that I'm going to want to talk the whole time, but then you're like 88 miles into this 100-mile race and you're like, I just want it to be quiet because I'm so sick, or I don't feel good, or I'm having a hard time breathing. Like, I actually can't hold a conversation, and I've even told people before, like, you can tell stories, I'm just going to listen to you, like, and I'm sorry I can't engage with you at all, but like, I love that you're telling stories. It's really helping me. Yeah, those are some of my bigger tips.
Yeah, and always think about, especially the longer the race gets, having a variety of different calorie options. From liquid calorie,
so good.
soda, chips. I like a lot of savory stuff. I know, like, Hillary, again, at I Am Tough, was like, I really like Spring Energy gels. I really like Awesome Sauce, whatever it's called.
And then what happened?
I'm just going to use that. And then, like, by mile 50, she's like, I'm over sugar.
Yeah.
Like, find me something else. And this is where, like, you have to, like, throw different things at the stomach and see what sticks. In your case, the only calorie, like anything calorie related at Tahoe 200 that you can actually get down were smoothies.
Yeah.
Like, who would have thunk it? Like, somebody had a smoothie maker or a blender at one of the aid stations and you had some of it. Thankfully, he was there. And you were like, oh my God, Eddie, this is actually good.
Yeah. And then Eddie bought me one.
Yeah.
Or bought me two. And then Gatorade, which I never drink.
Yeah.
Gatorade was like
store-bought Gatorade.
Rocket fuel. Yeah. It was crazy. But over the course of 3.5 days, I couldn't get, I think it was a total of like 3,000 calories from that race.
Which is insane.
It was insane.
Yeah.
Everyone was trying to get me. I think, remember that you had me take the quesadilla from Heavenly when you first started pacing me the first time. And I kept that quesadilla with me for an entire day.
I know.
And I would eat little pieces. Everyone thought, like, that you still have that? That is disgusting. And I was like, Billy told me to eat this and I'm eating it. Like, every little bit. I was just trying little bits of this disgusting, greasy, like, sun-beaten cheese that was like sweating in my back. It was so gross. Oh. I know. So good. Well, these are all great tips, Billy. Wait, were you going to say something right there?
No, I was just, I forgot I had to, I'm doing dinner prep for our little commune here. So I'm cooking for the entire family. So
I love that.
I should run over here in a minute, but this was like such a joy. This, we could easily do a Rogan-esque podcast of like 3 or 4 hours and feel like no time has gone by.
I know.
But in this instance, like, I'm getting nudged via text message from Hillary, like, you're supposed to make steaks for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Well, and I said, and I was kind of giggling when I texted to you, right? I was like, I'm thinking like 75, maybe 90 minutes. And here we are, like almost 2 hour mark.
That'll happen.
I'm like, I don't know when you and I have ever been able to keep a conversation at just an hour, but, wishful
like the
thinking.
Absurd and ridiculous to like the deeply like profound. So we have range in our conversations for sure.
We do. And I love that. I love our friendship, Billy. I thank you so much for your time. I know the listeners are really going to enjoy this podcast and they're going to come back to it. I just want to say specifically, thank you so much for sharing a little piece of your story. I know that's going to resonate with a lot of people. I think it's so powerful, like I said earlier, to hear that you have come from so many different like walks of life. Like, you've lived so many like different lives, and then to see where you are today. We're definitely going to do a podcast part 2. I think there's so much more that we can dive into, not only with your story, but just like your wealth of experience and just the stories you tell and the adventures you still strive to go on, and this story that you're still writing. It's very inspiring. And I'm just so excited to be a part of that journey too.
Well, thank you. And I'm excited to be a part of your continued story in finishing up the 200-mile series in Moab.
Yes, Billy's
I'm really
coming out
looking
to
forward
pace
to that.
me. Yes, Billy. I was like, after Tahoe 200, I was like, Billy absolutely needs to be there
Yeah.
at Moab 240. He knows how to put up with me, probably like no other pacer does. Like he endures a lot. So.
And I'm bringing a little mini blender. I'm going to bring a whole bunch of fruit and
a magic bullet.
Yeah, magic bullet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we go, now I don't know exactly when this is coming out, and I'm rarely
Friday. It's coming out in a couple days.
So I'm really self-promotional, but this is for a greater cause.
Please
if there's
do.
one thing
I was
that I
going to
can
ask
plug,
you. Yes.
I am, after I pace you, a couple of weeks after that, I will be running the New York City Marathon.
So awesome.
It is. I'm going to be running it with our friend Justin Grunewald on behalf of the Brave Like Gabe organization foundation. Obviously, was a foundation set up by Gabe Grunewald, who passed away, his ex-wife from his former, I shouldn't say ex-wife, his late wife. I know
what you meant. I know his late wife.
Yeah, I just want to make that correct.
Yes.
Who was an amazing, phenomenal track athlete who suffered from rare cancer, which is what the organization supports. So I am, the link isn't set up quite yet, but Justin and I will both be raising money for Brave Like Gabe for this marathon run. And like I said, we're going to run it together. We're going to create some content out of it. And if you see us there, I hope you say hello. But more importantly, I hope you give whatever you can to this organization for this greater good that, again, supports rare cancer research. And I think it's an important thing. And I was just so moved and touched by Justin, Gabe, her story that I wanted to do this for a while. So I just wanted to put that little plug in there before we wrap up.
I love that. And I'll make sure for our listeners, check out the links. We'll have a link to the foundation. And as soon as Billy gets me that link where you can donate, we'll put that there too. But Billy, where can people follow you on social media? Because I know they'll be able to follow this journey. They'll be able to check out your YouTube story as it comes out. What are those handles?
Yeah, it's just at Billy Yang on most social media. BillyYang.com, YouTube.com/Billy Yang if you want to see my content. Perfect. And SallyMcRae.com for even better stuff. So I highly encourage you to check that out. Sally, it has been, I can't believe how long it's been. It seems like both yesterday and like decades that we've hung out and shared miles together. And I'm looking forward to sharing some more and creating more stories and content. But thank you for allowing me to do this, for giving me this little stage of this incredible podcast that you're putting on now. Like I said, I'm just like proud papa over here at everything you're doing, all these different verticals and content that you're creating and inspiring people. Like it's really, you remember I remember 2015 going to Western States after the year after Western Time came out. Yeah. And this growing momentum of people that started to know you, who are inspired by you and your story. And now it's just like seeing you at Mammoth Trail Fest, seeing you at the book signing, seeing you at all these events where people are just like moved to tears and you're just so generous with your time. You hug complete strangers like from the jump, and you like put them at this ease and comfort, and you're so invested in their stories and their journey. It's just really inspiring thing to witness and behold. So consider me one of those people who are continually inspired by you and your story. So thank you, Sally. It's a great honor.
My brother from another mother right here, always encouraging, always kind. And I could say all the same things about you, truly. Friends, listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to hit play. I know that you will be further encouraged and inspired by checking out all of Billy's content. It's some of my personal favorite. It's known worldwide for a reason. You can best bet that you will see Billy in the upcoming Tahoe 200 film, which is set to release in just a couple weeks. Billy makes a very significant showing there. And but also he will be at my Moab 240 pacing me for that last race. We are doing a Moab 240 film as well. And so you'll get to know Billy a little bit through these films if you don't know him yet. To all of our listeners, thank you for being here. And we encourage you to keep choosing strong.